I want to talk a little bit tonight about the executive powers of Canada. The executive powers is another way of saying the ruling power. Who has the ruling power here in Canada? When you look into the Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, Article 9, it states that the executive government and authority of and over Canada is hereby declared to continue and be vested in the Queen. So we see right now there is one witness of law that states that it is the Queen who has the executive power here in Canada. Now, as I spoke last night and shared with you that government, they create laws. And the laws they create are called enactments or regulations. Now, when you look into one of these created laws that the government has made, it's called Succession to the Throne Act. And in the preamble, it reads as follows. Whereas the Constitution Act of 1867 provides that the executive government and authority of and over Canada is vested in Her Majesty the Queen. So we clearly see with two witnesses of law in their own writings that is indeed Her Majesty the Queen that is vested with the executive powers here in Canada. As you saw, it is declared that the power, the executive power, has been vested in the Queen, and she is the sovereign of Canada. When you look to the Canadian Citizenship Act, you will see that the people of Canada are being asked to take an oath of allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. Furthermore to this executive power that the Queen has, she transfers her powers to the Governor General of Canada. This is described for us in the Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, Article 10. Article 10 of the Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, reads as follows. The provisions of this Act referring to the Governor General extended and apply to the Governor General for the time being of Canada, or other the Chief Executive Officer or Administrator for the time being, carrying on the government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the Queen. So the Governor General of Canada is carrying on the government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the Queen. This is not contestable. This is in the Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, Article 10. If you continue to further read the Constitution Act of Canada, you will find that this Governor General has been granted the right to transfer his powers to the lieutenant governors of the provinces, because each province has a lieutenant governor, and furthermore, the lieutenant governor can transfer the powers and duties that he receives to the ministers of certain departments. So you'll have a transport minister, an education minister, and so forth. Well, the powers that these ministers have come forth from the lieutenant governor, which comes forth from the governor general, which comes forth from the Queen. When you look into another one of those created laws that the government creates, those enactments and regulations, this one's called the Governor General's Act. And you look in Article 2, and you find the following statement. The Governor General of Canada or other Chief Executive Officer or Administrator carrying on the government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the Sovereign, by whatever title designated, is a corporation sole. So we see, again, that the Governor General is carrying on the government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the Sovereign. And we know that the Sovereign presently is Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of Canada. Again, just going to say it one more time. We have the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, who is considered to have the executive authority or executive power of Canada. She transfers it to the Governor General, who then transfers it to the Lieutenant Governors, who then transfers some of these duties and responsibilities to subsequent ministers. Now, when we look at the Canadian Citizenship Act, this is what we find. We find that the oath of citizenship is as follows. I swear or affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So you see they're naming the individual. It's Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and that now this is the oath you're taking and binding yourself to. They're saying that that's the oath you are binding yourself to. That I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. So based upon that oath, you have now declared that you are going to obey the laws of Canada. So when these executive powers, the Governor General, the Lieutenant Governor Generals, the ministers, when laws are put into existence, you have said that I promise to obey these laws. Now looking back into the Constitution Act of Canada 1867, Article 91, we find the following. It shall be lawful for the Queen. Now notice that. Who is the one they're speaking about? The Queen. By and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada. So it's very clear in the Constitution Act of Canada that it is stating that it is lawful for the Queen, with advice and consent and agreement, to make laws for Canada for the peace and the order of Canada. So again, it's the Queen we see who is actually making laws. When we look to the government enactments and regulations, we find the following statement in the beginning of this documentation, of these documentations. It states, now therefore, Her Majesty, the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons, enacts as follows. So legally, it's Her Majesty who is enacting the laws, the regulations, the enactments here in Canada. And it's not surprising. Why? Run it down one more time. The Queen has executive powers. She transfers them to the Governor General, who transfers them to the Lieutenant Governor. She's the one who's in control of this system. We take an oath to the Queen. We are apparently took an oath to the Queen. We've pledged our allegiance, promised to obey her laws. When a law is given force, it's her who's placing the law into existence. Now, when they are claiming that you are a Canadian citizen and that you are being held under the Citizenship Act, that you have taken an oath, a pledge of allegiance to Her Majesty, and you have promised to obey the laws of Canada, you see here that in the Constitution Act of Canada, that it's the Queen that is responsible for making those laws. And it's not surprising because this whole system is set up around the monarch. This is servitude. Clear and simple. Without further having to explain any of this, this is servitude. As you can see, well, one good thing about it is that we have natural rights, as I spoke about last night, fundamental human rights. And the government didn't create these rights, but they have an obligation to respect and ensure and recognize these rights. Now, one of these rights that are in existence for us to claim and exercise is in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 8.2. It states, no one shall be held in servitude. So if they're trying to hold us in servitude to Her Majesty, saying we've taken a pledge of allegiance, we've promised to obey her laws, she's enacting laws, and we must follow them, we have the right to stand up and say, no, I don't want to be held in servitude to Her Majesty, the Queen. I'm not her subject, I'm not her servant, I will not pledge my allegiance to her or give an oath to her. That natural, fundamental human right that says no one can hold us in servitude, it has to be expressed in domestic law. Because Canada is a signatory to the international covenants, it produced an obligation upon Canada to express that fundamental right. So up till now I've shown you how they've placed us into servitude. So where and how is Canada fulfilling their obligation? First I'm going to read you from international law, the article of law that places the obligation upon Canada. So we're not already provided for by existing legislative or other measures. Each state party to the present covenant undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its constitutional process and with the provisions of the present covenant to adopt such laws or other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognized in the present covenant. So Canada had the obligation to give effect to the right that says no one shall be held in servitude. And they had to bring this law in to Canada, into domestic law, through the Constitution Act of Canada. In 1982, Canada did indeed redo the Constitution Act. They had to, because they had to fulfill their obligations under international law. When you look into the Constitution Act of Canada 1982 in Article 7, you will find your right preserved not to be held in servitude. The Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, Article 7. Everyone, now here, everyone is only the human being. If you've watched my other videos, I've shared it twice or 3 times. One of the rulings from the Justice Department that states that the everyone here, the one who's being mentioned, the subject or player, is only the human being. And the rights being expressed in this article of law can only apply to a human being and not to an artificial entity. So in the Constitution Act of Canada, Article 7, our rights as a human being, not to be held in servitude, have been preserved. It says everyone has the right to liberty. So you have the right to liberty. Further to that, if you look into the Constitution Act of Canada, Article 26, it states that the rights and freedoms that have been listed and enumerated in this Constitution Act does not mean that Canada will deny other rights and freedoms that are in existence. We know that Canada has the obligation not to hold us in servitude. We don't have to be held as a subject or servant of Her Majesty. I've walked you step by step tonight through the laws of Canada, showing you through the Constitution Act and subsequent enactments or regulations who has the power, how they're operating it against us, and what mechanism they're using against us.